Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of And Yet We Believe. My name is Ann Pimentel.
And I'm Roger.
And we are a married couple having honest conversations about the beautiful, messy middle of Latter-day Saint life. We've got a good topic tonight. What are we talking about?
We are talking about joy. Now, joy is a topic we talk about a lot in the church. Joy and happiness. Plenty of people will tell you how to be happy and how to have joy. And we love the cause and effect on this sort of thing. If you do this, you will be happy.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of when I was in the bishopric in our ward in Seattle. And I was kind of waiting around for all these blessings to come in. Because this is something you hear, right? You know, you serve in some calling or whatever, and you're going to get these blessings in your life. And I kind of like waited, and it was mostly just hard. And I was gone a lot. We had young kids at home. At church on Sundays, I'd be up at the stand, and I'd be seeing Ann, in the congregation with little kids running around.
Because I had a baby like right before you were called.
Yeah. And frankly, it was mostly just hard.
Yeah.
And, despite all these promises, the cause and effect promises that we love to talk about all the time. So what we're talking about today is, what do you do when you're doing all the things and you're not just magically joyful all the time?
Yeah, and on Sunday, a high councilman gave a talk, and he quoted Elder Kieran's famous talk of Welcome to the Church of Joy.
Right.
And I just started thinking, like, what does that even mean to be the Church of Joy? And so I listened to Elder Kieran's talk again today, and he essentially is equating Jesus with joy.
Okay.
I think he uses it in place of Jesus. So, like, instead of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's the Church of Joy.
Interesting.
And so but in his talk, he really is talking a lot about actual church meetings, the sacrament, and how we show up to church, and how we're, whether we're welcoming people and all of that. And so that talk is a lot more about the actual Sunday experience, but we want to talk deeper about joy and what it means to have joy, and really understand that, because I don't know that we really do.
Yeah. And one thing that we do on this podcast is we love to tackle topics that we have not solved yet.
Yep.
And work our way through them. And this is a way that we do some discovery and work through those topics. And so, I believe that this joy in the gospel is a real thing. But I know that I haven't mastered it. If it's something you can master, I know that I don't feel it all the time.
Yeah. So let's jump in.
Okay.
I think one of the first things that probably most members feel is that if we're not always happy, then we're doing it wrong, and we don't actually have any joy in our life. Because
if we follow the cause and effect thing, if you do this, if you do your ministry, and if you read your scriptures, if you do all these things, then you will be happy. So ergo, if you're not happy, you must be doing it wrong.
Yeah.
The math is bad.
Yeah. And so, to be fair, I think in our church we teach that joy and happiness are different.
Okay.
I've always heard and internalized that joy is an eternal principle. That joy is something deeper than happiness. Happiness is temporary. And so, but I think that there's a big disconnect there, because when we teach things like eternal families, or that we all have to do certain things to get back to God,
right,
then for a lot of families where that is not going to play out in that way, and the way that we are taught it, there's a lot of sadness. We talk about sad heaven a lot, or empty chairs in heaven, or whatever. And so I think there's a disconnect where we're taught that joy is this afterlife, eternal thing that we're going to have, but the way that we are prescribed to achieve that joy is not really achievable. It's not something that we can control.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's important to note that difference between an eternal joy and a temporary happiness. But still, if we're not feeling that joy, we still think that we're doing something wrong spiritually.
Right. And so having that happiness or joy, and I don't know that we can hold a really strong line between the two, but having those things seems like a prerequisite to doing things right. And I think there's so many examples of this.
Yeah.
And an easy one for me is my mission, and this idea that it had to be the best 2 years, right?
Yeah, there's a movie about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that it had to be this great, happy, joyous thing. My mission was hard. I think all missions are hard. Yeah. But here's the rub. I went into my mission knowing, all right, this has to be the best 2 years, or I have done this wrong. Mm-hmm. I have to come back with this big smile on my face and all of these things, or I have done it wrong. Yeah. And to me, that really highlights what we've been talking about.
Yeah. I really, just as a side note, I think it's really unfortunate when adults say the mission was the best 2 years of their life. Like, have you not done anything since then? I don't know. There's so many things that could fill that, but...
Right. It's not the best 2 years anymore.
Yeah.
Certainly,
but people still talk about it like, oh, it was the nostalgic best 2 years of my life.
At the time, was it the best 2 years? I don't know. You're not very old at the time. Yeah. You don't have that many years, and a bunch of them were high school and stuff, which is tough also.
And I mean, we'll get into this later, but if by best 2 years you mean like the ones that stretched me the most and helped me to grow, that definitely could be it.
Okay.
But it is not pure happiness or joy at all.
Yep.
And right alongside that is parenthood.
Okay.
We are told that our kids are going to be our greatest joys. And gosh dang it, it's hard. Parenting is so hard. And I mean, had I known what we would go through,
oh my gosh,
it would be really hard to choose this.
And as parents of teenagers, anybody who's listening who has teenagers or has had teenagers knows each stage keeps getting harder. Yeah. We haven't gotten to a stage yet where it gets easier. I don't know if there is one. Maybe when they've left the house. I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet.
Heard that's not true.
Okay, see? It just keeps getting harder, and it's supposed to be this happy... Yeah. We love our kids.
Well,
but it's hard.
I mean, this is... we're going to keep coming back to this, that if people are saying parenthood brings you the most joy because you are growing and you're stretched, then yes. So, I mean, we're kind of hinting at this. You have to be able to hold the sorrow and the joy at the same time. And we'll get into that. But that paradox is really going to be the key to understanding joy.
Yeah. And we could give more examples. Marriage itself is...
We're great.
We're awesome.
We're so happy together.
I'm talking only about other people. I mentioned callings already, serving in a leadership calling or a high demand calling of some sort. Even attending the temple is one of these things where you're supposed to come out after the first time and have had this spiritual experience. Yeah. It's real different when you go through for the first time. And, I had an okay experience, but it wasn't this, lightning bolt of revelation sort of a thing.
Yeah, I had a very... my sister had told me going into it, you'll be fine, there's no test at the end. And then there kind of was. You had some things that you had to repeat back, and I was like, there was a test. You lied. So yeah. I felt a little blindsided.
Yeah.
I think when we are talking about just being happy all of the time and focusing on joy, we do lose out on this ability to really get into the meat of the gospel, which I think comes from Jesus suffering in Gethsemane and on the cross, and lamentations. Mm-hmm. The Psalms have so many lamentations. There's, Job, there's just so many different things. Joseph Smith, even in Liberty Jail.
For sure.
There are hard, like really deep, guttural, hard things that are dealt with in the scriptures. We don't like to stay there. We don't like to read those or focus on those. And again, that is where the depth and the growth comes from.
I think we're okay when they have a happy ending. We like to put a bow on it.
Yep. Yeah. There's a quote from Father John Deere, and he said, "Blessed are those who mourn," Jesus says. "Millions of people in our world mourn. because their loved ones have been killed by war, starvation, or injustice? Do we grieve for those who die in war, for those incinerated by nuclear weapons and bombs, for the many thousands who die each day from starvation? Do we allow the sorrow of the world's poor to touch our hearts? Do we look the suffering of the world in the eye, or do we turn away in denial and thus postpone our own inevitable confrontation with grief? Jesus promises that as we mourn the death of our sisters and brothers around the world, God consoles us, and we find a peace, even a joy that we did not know possible. So it's in that mourning with those that mourn and acknowledging the hardship and the suffering and the death and all of it, that's where God enters in, and we can feel that peace and that joy that is promised to us in the scriptures over and over.
Yeah. I think we're so much better at talking about these things when things are good.
Yep.
And we can say, oh yeah, you might go through some trials and it's going to be okay. And there's going to be a happy ending on it. And when you're in it, it doesn't feel that way.
For sure.
And it doesn't have to be a tragedy. It doesn't have to be a loss of a loved one. It can just be when things aren't great and you feel like nothing matters. And like, it's hard to get in this mode of like, oh yeah, there's going to be a happy ending at this, because there isn't necessarily. That's not how it's wired.
Yeah. That's a Hollywood version
right
of gospel.
Right.
And
I appreciate, I mean, a number of years ago, President Hinckley shared this quote, and it's widely attributed to him. He was actually quoting someone else. But I remember when President Hinckley said, anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he has been robbed. Most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up to be just people. Most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration. Most jobs are more often dull than otherwise. And it's so refreshing, because we don't get this very often, to have a prophet lean in on like, hey, you know what? Sometimes things are just things, and there's not a happy ending. It's just the way that life is.
Yeah. Big bowl of sucky soup. Yeah, I don't remember that quote from President Hinckley. That's pretty incredible that, that he would acknowledge it in that way.
Yeah.
And actually, that reminds me of, we shared a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about the proclamation.
Yeah.
The talk that Chieko Kazaki gave in the session, it was the women's session of, the week before conference. Yeah, when the proclamation was announced. She shared a quote, or in her talk, she shared about marriages and life that is hard. And she went through a similar list of different things that people suffer through and experience. And again, she brought it back to Jesus, which is where the true joy comes from. So anyway.
Yeah. I think our instinct as Latter-day Saints, as, Christians, as Americans, I don't know what this really gets tied to, but I think our instinct is to label some emotions as bad and then push them on out of the way, right? Sadness, anger, grief, doubt, any of these things get labeled as negative when they are real human experiences.
Yeah, they're just emotions. They're not good or bad. It's just an emotion that you have. Right,
and we label them as bad, and we move them out of the way, and we feel like they're bad to have.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do you tell kids to suck it up or stop crying, when they're just having a very natural reaction to something?
Yeah.
And really having that full breadth of emotion is beautiful. It's really it's really empowering, actually, to be able to feel all of those things and not feel shame because you're feeling X emotion, right? I think that people that are able to hold that paradox, they're able to acknowledge and hold suffering of other people or within their own lives and still express joy and praise and stuff. It's just so beautiful to see, and it's such an inspiration. For me, the place that I see this the most is at the Genesis group. These are people, the Black saints in our church, that have real suffering. They're dealing with racism, they're dealing with really hard situations, and they show up to church, to Genesis group, and they praise God in a way that I've never seen in our church.
Yep.
It is full of joy. They're, and it's not just because they're up clapping and dancing and, singing, hands in the air.
Yep.
That's their outward expression of the joy that they feel on the inside. When they are talking about Jesus, God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. That is a deep belief that they hold, and that I'm trying to implement in my life in that same way. But they just, and then, they'll sing these beautiful praise songs, and it's so full of joy. And then they'll get up and give these talks about Black history, or the things. Last month it was President Hugh talking about this racist slur that was yelled at him. And yet it always comes back to God and to Jesus and that pure joy. And it is so beautiful. I love it so much.
Yeah. I am just learning now, at this point in my life, in my 40s, that you have to be able to hold multiple things.
Yeah.
Like, emotions and feelings are not sequential. If you're waiting for the sadness to end and the grief to end so that you can be happy, you're going to wait for the rest of your life.
Yep.
And I spent decades suppressing those things, those negative emotions, right? The darkness, believing that I could only have darkness or light within me.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that that's wrong, and you can hold multiple things, and you have to hold multiple things. I was thinking about in the musical Wicked, Glinda sings this song, and she says, "Happy is what happens when all your dreams come true." And it's this thing, and I don't know, maybe it's obvious to everybody else, but it's ironic. Like, she's singing this thing, and then she flutters for just a second, and then she says, "Isn't it?" And just starts to doubt that.
Trying to convince herself again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. She's trying to tell herself, I have everything I ever wanted, so I'm supposed to be happy, right? And even just today, I was in the car, and I was listening to, the same music I always listen to, which is All Out 90s station on Spotify. And that song by Sheryl Crow came on, and it's...
it makes you happy.
That's the one. Then why are you so sad?
Yeah.
And it's because those things can coexist, and they have to coexist, or you're never going to have the happy, and you're never going to have the joy.
Yeah, that's really great. There's a good quote from Nadia Bolz-Weber, and she says, "Joy, especially joy that is shared, isn't not paying attention to all the things that suck. Joy is the effervescence of the Holy Spirit bubbling up out of the caverns of suffering, saying to the forces that try and keep us in the tomb that no, love is stronger."
Whoa, that is good.
Isn't that good?
A lot of imagery in that.
Yeah. I wonder what it would look like if we could show up at our worship services at church on Sunday and actually hold both things. Show each other how we're holding this paradox.
Because we absolutely don't, we've talked about this before on the podcast, we don't do the vulnerable thing, we don't do the doubt thing. These are not things that are kind of culturally allowed in many of our meetings. And I have gotten messages from people saying, "Hey, that's not true in my ward. We have these great experiences," and I am really, really glad, because I think generally that's
it's just not the norm. And actually, I was thinking today that I was remembering a talk that was given in our ward by a woman who had had multiple miscarriages and stillborn babies, and I felt the Spirit so strongly when she was talking, and I was able to connect to her talk so much more than I ever had, because she was being so real and vulnerable about holding both things.
Yeah.
And it was really moving to witness somebody do that. And it was an invitation into that joy with her, where then I could turn and have empathy for what she went through. And those aren't things that I've ever gone through.
Right.
So I can't, I don't share the experience, but I can have empathy for what she experienced.
Yeah.
So another thing that is important is that when we do have joy, it's almost like this radical resistance to the hard world that's around us.
Yeah.
It's not a denial of what is going on, but when we have, I would love to go through the scriptures of Jesus and pick out the times where he is having this radical joy, right? Where he is showing love and this deeper understanding of the plan, really.
Sure.
And exemplifying this radical joy, because he did it. He did it with Lazarus when he died, and he sat there and wept with Mary and Martha, knowing fully well that he was about to heal and raise Lazarus from the dead.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And so he could hold both of those things in that moment. I think it's just really beautiful.
I like this idea that for us, it's almost a stubbornness. It's, life is going to throw everything at us. It's not an if, it's a when, it's going to be that way, but we can kind of stubbornly have joy.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah. It's also one of the things that we've learned a lot in therapy and just talking with our kids, and the growth mindset that our kids learn a lot about at school is the importance of the not yet.
Okay.
To say I can't do that thing, or I'm never going to be happy, or, instead if you say I can't do that yet, or I am not happy yet, but I will get there, or, something that is, it prepares your mind for growth.
Well, the scriptures describe joy as a fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, etc. And if we kind of push that metaphor a little bit, you can't manufacture fruit. You can't force fruit. You can tend to the tree, you can water it, and the fruit's going to show up when it shows up.
Yeah.
And we've got a peach tree in the backyard, and it's giving 0 peaches this year. Sometimes it doesn't come at all. But what you can do is you can keep watering and keep tending to the tree, and the fruit will show up when it shows up. You don't get to control that. And I love that as a metaphor for joy. It's going to come. It's just not going to come on your schedule necessarily.
Yeah. And I actually love that it is a fruit of the Spirit, because like I was saying earlier, we always teach that joy is this eternal thing that we'll have later.
Oh, yeah.
But the fruit of the Spirit is a now thing, that it is possible whenever we need it.
Right.
Right. And so if we are in a mindset where we can accept the joy to come, and we have the Spirit in our life, then we will be able to see that fruit. Again, it's not when we want it necessarily.
Right.
But it is something that is possible as a fruit of the Spirit. And to know that it's possible gives me hope. That it's not this farther off thing that I have to wait for and suffer through my entire life. But it's possible at some point.
Yeah. And I think the fact that we can't manufacture it, the fact that, the Spirit listeth where it listeth, I think the problematic part of that is sometimes we put on the facade and we are pretending, putting on a costume, showing up to church with our happy face on. We've already well established that generally people are reluctant to be vulnerable at church. And it's easier to just kind of slap a smile on it and call it a day. And I think largely that means we're not bringing our whole selves to church in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved hearing Susan and Cynthia on it last. She said it. They always talk about it as putting on your Sunday best.
Right.
Doesn't mean anything about clothes, but it's this facade that we put on. It's almost a costume that we wear to church so that nobody can know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And we've been having this conversation a lot lately, where in Relief Society, things will come up here and there. People will talk about struggles they're having with their kids, or, a hard time in their life. And that sort of stuff happens to a degree. It often is just like, I'm just going to barely put this out there, but I'm not going to go deep. I'm not going to get vulnerable with it. I'll just mention it. But it doesn't happen as much in Elders Quorum. Yeah,
this is what we've discussed. You can make it a gendered thing. I don't know. It's a cultural thing. I'm not sure. But at least in my experience, in a variety of wards, the vulnerability just doesn't really happen in Elders Quorum.
Yeah, well, that is one of the downfalls of patriarchy on men. right? Men are taught to crush down all the emotions and to not get vulnerable and not, I mean, it's true for men and women, but I think more so for men, that when emotion does come, you do anything and everything you can to hide it, to, excuse it away, to laugh it away, to get sarcastic, whatever it is, so that you don't have to actually show the emotion.
100%. Absolutely agree. This is a perfect description of what I did for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a therapist and being able to talk to people that kind of has unlocked that a little bit. I'm sure I still do it. But that has changed me
mm-hmm.
to unlock that part of me and be able to hold both things at the same time instead of trying to push one out of the way.
Yeah. And I wish that we would understand that it actually, when we can hold both things and be present to the emotions, that actually is more authentic and showing our whole selves, and that is, I mean, I think that's really the goal in life, is to be able to stand in front of somebody else and say, here's my whole self. Will you accept me? And I will accept your whole self. And I mean, that's how we leave out the judgment. That's how we lead with love. We have so many things that we teach about, but we don't really put into practice to be able to do that with other brothers and sisters in the world.
Right. Now, a few episodes ago of this podcast, we talked about near enemies and far enemies, and I wanted to bring that idea back.
Yeah.
And I was trying to parse through, and I'd love your thoughts on this.
Okay.
I'm trying to parse through what the near enemy of joy is. And the best I could come up with is that the near enemy of joy is like a cheerfulness, like a false pretense of being cheerful when it's not really what you are feeling inside.
Yeah. I mean, the words that came to my mind were toxic positivity.
Same thing. Yeah. I think we're on the same road here.
Yeah, that it's the facade. It's the always looking on the bright side, but not really acknowledging the dark night of the soul that people have, right?
Yeah, and it made me wonder, maybe joy isn't the goal. Maybe the goal is the full breadth of human experience. Maybe the goal is to feel everything. Because otherwise we're going to do that suppressing thing again. Yeah. We're going to push everything else out of the way and say, hey, I have to get to that joy. That's my goal. And maybe that's not actually the right goal to have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I feel like I need to sit and as Susan and Cynthia say, we've reached the laying down portion. Got to lay down and think about that for a minute.
Yeah, let's hit pause here. And we're back.
It is really interesting to think about joy not being the end-all be-all goal.
Right.
But in reality, if our goal is to become like our heavenly parents, we learn in the Pearl of Great Price that God wept.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
God holds that sadness and the love. And so it is that full breadth of human emotion and human experience that is actually going to be like our heavenly parents.
Yep.
That's really beautiful to think about. One thing that we don't talk about very often in our church is the mystics. And these are...
We love the mystics.
I'm still learning about the mystics. I feel like I am in my infancy of learning about who the mystics are,
awesome.
What it means to be a mystic. But mystics like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, bringing up modern, Mirabai Starr, Jim Finley. Sure. These are all people, all people that have a contemplative relationship with spirituality.
Yep.
I think is a good way to say it. They have testified of a joy that isn't dependent on circumstances, because they know it doesn't originate in the circumstance. Eckhart called it the divine spark. Teresa of Avila called it the interior castle. Mirabai Starr says it's that keeping the heart open, even in hell, makes space for the beloved. It is in the darkest night of our souls when we all know, it is in the darkest night of our souls when all we know is that we know nothing, that the presence of the sacred may quietly well up, mingling with our pain and connecting us to a love that will never die. This teaching from these mystics who often were in the deepest suffering and solitude that they ever experienced, Julian of Norwich was teaching and writing after surviving the Black Death. Teresa of Avila had chronic pain. Merton wrote from inside the Cold War. They were all in solitude at one time or another, which to me sounds like absolute hell. But they were able to talk about this from that hell, from that sorrow and suffering, still talk about this beautiful connection to God. And the fact that God showed up in their lives in those horrible times, not after, not because of necessarily, but in the midst of that hard time, that just teaches me who our heavenly parents are, that they are loving and they will never give up.
Right.
They will never stop searching for somebody.
These were people who could hold both, even in the hardest times.
Yeah.
And we're still new to contemplative practices.
Yeah.
You and I are. And, but this is a super interesting road to me because, we talk about these contemplative practices like meditation and Lectio Divina and, silent prayer and these sorts of things. And it's so different from what we kind of inherit from our LDS culture.
Yeah.
Because the LDS response to things going wrong is to do more. It's read your scriptures more. It's pray more. It's go to the temple. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And these are all good things. But the reaction is, you got to shovel more coal onto the fire. You have to do more. And this is the exact opposite of contemplative practice. Having this silence in your life where you can be in communion with God. I think the hustle might be keeping us from connecting with ourselves and recognizing the joy that we could be having in our lives. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your spirituality is to do less.
Yeah.
And put handcuffs on me and take me to LDS jail for saying that. I think that's true, that sometimes you have to do less so that you can be just communing with God. And that might not look like normal prayer. The most spiritual time of my day is when I go for a walk in the morning. We don't talk about that at church. We don't learn about walking as a spiritual practice. It's a very spiritual practice for me. It's where I start to see God in everything.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the book by Richard Rohr, and it might be called something like In Everything. It has a leaf on the front. I can't remember what it's called, but it has a leaf on the front because he talks about in his contemplative practice that he will just stare at something for a long time. In podcasts that I've heard him on recently, he'll sit on his front porch and there's a dumpster across the street from his house, from his hermitage. And somebody has spray painted something like "You Are Loved" on the dumpster. So he just sits there and stares at this dumpster for hours. And that is his time that he has, closed off his mind to a lot of the distractions. And he's able to just focus on God and see God in all the things that are around him, whether it's a dumpster or a leaf on the ground or a spider web or a duck or, whatever it is. He just takes this time to see God in the world.
I love that.
He was sharing an experience in one of his weekly emails that I got. And he says, cosmic or spiritual joy is something we participate in. It comes from elsewhere and flows through us. It has little or nothing to do with things going well in our own life at that moment. I remember thinking that this is why the saints could rejoice in the midst of suffering. And so he had this kind of opening experience where he realized, God is everywhere and that there's beauty in everything. And then he says, at that same moment, I experienced the exact opposite emotion. The tears that he had were at the same time tears of an immense sadness. The sadness at what we're doing to the earth, sadness about the people whom I had hurt in my life, and sadness to it my own mixed motives and selfishness. I hadn't known that two such contrary feelings could coexist. I was truly experiencing the non-dual mind of contemplation. So he had this joy and tears of joy because of seeing God everywhere, and then at the exact same time realized that those tears also meant or stood for the suffering that was going on in the world.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is. I do want to make a shout out, I guess, to anybody who's listening who's not feeling joy right now in your life. And I, to be honest, I'm putting myself in that category right now. You know, and there's been some real kind of dark night of the soul moments. But I believe very, very strongly that your ability to feel joy is not a referendum on your faith or your worth or your standing before God. I do not believe that God's love is contingent on us having a smiling face as we go about our day. I just don't think that that's a requirement in God's eyes.
I almost think that hinders us from actually connecting with God.
Yeah.
When we put up this brick wall almost of not being able to connect in a heart way with people.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it is, I don't know. I just think that there's such beauty, and it's so important as members that we can recognize the joy and the suffering that everybody has.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've talked so many times on this podcast about when we are out in the world that when we see people, instead of judging, we need to be curious and we need to wonder about the people. And it just opens the door a little bit to seeing that maybe they are not whatever you're judging them that they maybe you think they are. You know, when we go to church and we see people that supposedly have these perfect lives, right? And then like this woman that gave the talk, I didn't know anything about her history, and I thought that she just had it all made and, you know, had these great kids and she was so happy, and then I learned that she had multiple miscarriages and like really, really hard experiences. It just opens that door enough to send in a little mercy and a little grace for whatever people are going through. Mirabai Starr is, she is one that has dealt with a lot of grief in her life. She lost a daughter when the daughter was 14. She got in a car accident and died. And so she talks about grief a lot. But she talks about how in Wild Mercy, in her book Wild Mercy, she says, joy and suffering are two sides of the same coin. Pain and suffering make life beautiful. That may be hard to believe while you're suffering, but the lessons you can learn from hardships are jewels to cherish. If you're suffering, it means you have a heart. Suffering is evidence of your capacity to love, and only those who understand suffering can understand life and help others. And then she jumps down. When you find people, I should just read it all. She says, the world needs your suffering, your courage, and your strength. Don't try to kill your pain. Share it with another. Communicate it. If the first person you talk to isn't the right one, find someone else. Somebody somewhere wants to listen to your pain, to connect with you and understand you. When you find them, when you lighten your burden and discover the jewels and joy that are alive beneath the pain, later you'll be present for others who are suffering. I really think that's important, that, again, we don't have to experience everything, but as we share that suffering with other people, it creates a bond, it creates a bridge.
Yeah.
I've often seen it described as the spider web, and we're just sending out little threads of connection to build this one giant spider web that connects the human race.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what I've historically not gotten in Elders Quorum, and really broadly from other men. You know, I think this is largely missing, for sure in men's circles, and I'm sure to some extent in women's circles as well.
Yeah, I mean, women have a tendency to go deeper faster.
I agree.
It always makes me think of that commercial about the guy who goes golfing all day with his friend, and
it was a comedy routine.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And the wife's like, "Oh, how's the wife?" And he's like, "I don't know, it didn't come up." We always joke about that, but it unfortunately it can land on different gendered sides, but I don't think that it is exclusive that men are bad and women are good at this. Like, we're all bad at being vulnerable in our own ways.
Yeah.
And so if we pull it back to Elder Kieran talking about how we should be the most joyful people on the earth because we have this gospel, that can feel too big and too scary.
It can be oppressive. I mean, it can feel like a weight, a burden to carry.
It can feel like toxic positivity when we're like, but I'm suffering in all of these ways.
Right.
How can I be the most joyful person on the earth? But when we realize that true joy is, you can feel true joy when you also hold the suffering at the same time, then I can understand how Jesus can make me, or can help me to feel that joy, and I can be hopefully one of the most joyful people on the earth as I hold those two things.
Yeah, if you're thinking of joy still as the absence of suffering, you're never going to get there. It's never going to end. And yeah, if you're waiting for the sad to be over so you can be happy, if you're clinging to that happy is what happens when your dreams come true, you're just never going to get there. It has to be the way that you live your life.
Yeah. I hadn't even really thought of this, but this is so important for our world right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just, like, 3 conversations just popped into my head of people saying, how do you do it? How do you keep going? How do you wake up every morning when there's a fresh new hell that we wake up to, whether it's in our own country or some other country where suffering is happening? How do you keep on going? And it's this, that I can hold what is happening, and I can hold that absolute suffering.
Yep.
Whether I'm feeling it personally or not.
Or seeing it in others.
And I can hold that, and I can say, but I have to have a hope in a God that is better and bigger than that.
Yep.
It's hard, but it's doable.
Yep. I think we better end it right there.
All right. Thanks for joining us tonight. If you want to find us online, I'm at The Vision Beautiful.
I'm at From the Overflow.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.